Hello, this is School Committee Update, today with the big boss, the superintendent. I should have asked you how you pronounce your name, Dr. Rubén Carmona?
You got it.
Okay, yeah. I'm Sarah Fishman. So how is it going?
It's going great. Thank you for asking. And yes, I don't know if I consider myself the big boss, but I have to respond to most of the challenges of the district. So
I don't think I've ever interviewed a superintendent. This is normally, you know, the elected school committee members appear. Yeah. And you were in your first year. This is a new gig for you, right?
Yeah, that's correct. This is my second year. Yeah.
Okay, right, right. Because you were hired in?
Last July.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk a little. You're very interesting because you are very different from the previous 4 school superintendents that I have been familiar with. And your first language is Spanish.
That's correct.
And you're from Colombia. Can you talk a little bit about what your childhood and education was like? Yeah. Were you in a rural area? What did you grow up in?
Yeah, I am one of 7 kids. So my parents grew up in the mountains where the coffee region is. At some point, my mom said, I want to make sure my kids have access to education, have more access to learning. So she uprooted the family, and we ended up in Cali. And I'm from Cali. The last 2 kids in the family grew up were born in Cali.
So that's a fairly big city, right?
That is 2.2 million people. Yeah, it's a little bit bigger than Boston, I would say. Urban as I was in the outskirts of the city, but it was just a normal childhood.
Were either your parents teachers, or was it just a general, we want this for our kids kind of thing?
The way I ended up into teaching is because, it was very clear for the 7 of us, growing up in a working family, in a class working family, that we needed to find our way to get our education if we wanted to change the trajectory of our livelihood or our status. And so we all went to school, we all went to college. I went to school I wanted to go to be a physician, but ended up settling for psychology or modern languages.
What do you mean settling?
I know.
I was a psychology major.
Correct.
I could take offense, but I will not.
I know, and not as again. It's funny what life brings you into your life. Is that right? So, the choices were between psychology or modern languages and linguistics.
That's very different.
I know. It's just because in Colombia. The only way you get into, if you are working class, you depended on your scores and your big like the SAT scores, and so that rank you. And so in order to get into
this is how it is in a lot of other countries.
I
know in Sweden it's that way.
Correct.
I've heard. Anyway, sorry.
So I was good, but not that good. So I settled for education. I just, love languages, and so I didn't think of, my dream was to become a simultaneous translator in the United Nations. That was like, okay, if I'm going to go this way, let's go this way.
That makes sense.
But it's really difficult to be able to translate simultaneously. So I realized my skill set doesn't allow me to do that. So I became a teacher. And so it was, I ended up in a bilingual school. That was in Cali still.
Right, okay.
It was a full immersion school, and that's also where I met my wife, and so.
So it was immersion in English?
Yes.
So, okay, that makes sense.
Full immersion in English, yeah.
So how many people in Colombia speak English? Because I saw the number somewhere and it seemed really low, given what you're talking about. That seems like.
Yeah, well, the native language is Spanish, so that's all people speak, but if you have the means, you go to a bilingual school.
Okay.
Or good schools always have a robust English program. So, for the most part, even my nephews that go to different schools, you can have kind of basic conversations with them in English.
Yeah.
So, English is one of those languages that universally everyone uses for commerce or for
Right.
communication.
It is, to use a strange phrase, the lingua franca, right? French phrase, English.
Yeah.
So when did you come to the U.S.?
So around 1995, that's when I came to the U.S. Yeah.
And you've worn a lot of hats, a lot of different education hats.
Yes.
You were a teacher in Lowell and Salem.
Correct.
You've been a principal. You've been an administrator. You've done a doctoral thesis. It looked like, I'm just reminding myself, it looked like, looking at your resume, that maybe 4th and 5th grade was your favorite age to teach. Is that right?
Yeah, so I did in Colombia. I taught 2nd grade to 5th grade to 4th grade. And when I was in Salem, I taught, at some point I taught Spanish as a 2nd language, and so I taught pretty much all the grades. But then I taught in a multi-age 4, 5, and 6. And so that was my range, yeah.
Is that your favorite, though?
As a principal, I love the upper middle school.
Okay.
And so I thought, they were so full of energy and also in a place in life in which they were changing and evolving. And so that's kind of my sweet as a principal, but as a teacher, 4th grade, that's where I really strengthened my muscle, my teaching muscle.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting distinction. And you have children. How old are they?
2. One is a junior, and the other one is, and she's around 17, and the other one is in Denver University, and he's 21.
And they go locally, or they're in a public, the daughter is?
Yeah, daughter is in Triton. So it's a tri-district school or district. And Lucas goes to DU in Colorado. Yeah.
The what?
Denver University in Colorado.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
right.
And that's the private
So
school.
what's her name? Because you mentioned Lucas and something else.
Sophia.
Sophia, okay. Sophia, interesting.
Yeah.
What is the capital of Colombia?
Bogota.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was thinking it was Sophia. I'm apologizing. That is a different country, so I'm sorry. That would have been really clever if I was right, but I was wrong.
Yeah.
So was it easy for you as a person to learn to speak English as a 2nd language?
So I went to...
You went to the
I went
school.
to study languages, so I already had a preconceived desire and notion of what I wanted to do. So French was the first. Our program was broken into 2, areas of emphasis, and French was the first one. And so I was more. French was easy because it is a Romance language.
Right. So
And
Spanish and French
correct.
are. English is weirder.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you learn anything as a child learning these other languages that has informed instruction with you as a professional?
Absolutely.
Anything specific that you thought, well, this makes it easier, or this makes it harder to acquire a 2nd language?
So there's that. Is that right? So anything that has to do with we use a filter to basically access the world, and so for multilingual learners, that filter comes in different ways. Because always you have to access through not just what comes through your ears, but also what you see. Often one of the things that I see that folks sometimes disregard is that a child who comes from a different place with a strong knowledge in their native language, that transition is very quick. And sometimes I feel that the transition to be multilingual.
Okay.
And sometimes I feel that folks, when a child is learning a 2nd language and already have a baseline, sometimes the tendency is to kind of treat that learner in a way in which it doesn't elevate their skill sets in their native language. So,
okay. So are you saying that learning the 2nd language doesn't fully allow for expression in the 1st language? I'm not sure.
No, what I'm saying is that being multilingual or having a strong base in your language allows you to make a transfer that is easy. And recognizing that you have that strength in that other language
Yes.
is looking at the learning of a second language from an asset perspective. Instead of like, kids don't know much and we're going to basically teach them basic things. Kids can learn a lot if they already have a strong base in their language. Often students who come in from places in which socioeconomics are difficult or where families are torn apart, sometimes it's very difficult to build on those strengths in their native language. But for the most part, there are ways to make sure that students learn if we have a mindset around a strength-based.
So do you have some examples in Somerville schools of how that is done effectively, or how it could be done effectively if other things?
Well, the
came
Unidos
up?
program
Yes.
is a program that utilizes some of those principles that we utilize the native language to build on a second language as well. And the idea that we value that,
Right.
that duality of languages.
Yeah.
So I think every time we see a language as a strength, even the idea of learning a second language for anyone, I think that is an exercise for the brain that is.
And
it
it's
creates
harder
different
the
things.
older
Yeah.
you get. It has never been something that's come easy to me, at least.
So my point is that I like to invite everyone to see a second language as an asset and not as a deficit, because often is
So
we have to.
here, at least in the high school, isn't it? There are over 50 different languages spoken or something. It's some fairly high number. So I would think that the default here, at least, is to value that, right? I mean,
Yeah, I
do
think
you-
that
do you-
across the board. So I think the Somerville,
yeah.
in that regard, has been very open to communities that are diverse. And so I think that you see that across the board. I think that how is that reflected in how we teach kids and making sure that we build on that strength on a regular basis and in everything we do. Sometimes that is something that we have to continue to work on.
So then, stop me if I'm asking too many
Yeah.
specific policy questions, but is there anything specific that can be done in the classroom or at the district level that would facilitate that?
Yeah. That's a great question. And I think that one of the things that we have built on the idea of culturally responsive teaching, which is, building the assets of the kids and making sure that we account for the strengths that they already bring, that they might not perceive as a strength in the classroom, but they are strengths. And so I think building on that is one thing that we are doing as a community. And also being very explicit about what we teach and understanding that, every child in their learning continuum has a strengths, and sometimes we have to think about different ways in which we address those strengths. So not just visually, not just orally, and so how teachers engage with the students can enhance the opportunities of learning.
You have given me the perfect segue to asking about your own now nearly adult children or adult children.
Yeah.
How are they bilingual? Are they multilingual? Are they?
Lucas does really well in Spanish, and he went to Waring, is a school where they did French immersion. So he does French, Spanish, and English. Sophia has had a little bit of a struggle with learning languages. She has a little bit of dyslexia, and she always has been averse at engaging in the second language. But we just went to Colombia recently, and she was much better. She was more confident about speaking.
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. So you've spoken about learning differences in your children and how that's made you, I believe the word was, a visceral advocate for accessible, multiple learning opportunities. Can you talk about that to the extent you're comfortable about how, as a parent, you negotiated that?
Good question. I think that most of the work that I do is informed by that lens, is the lens of how my kids, the frustrations they share about their schools, the frustrations they share about being a teenager, the frustrations they share about what is it like to be a student or a citizen of this world at this time of the year, or this time at this time in our communities. I like the high school experience is so interesting to me because that's also what that's where when my kids struggle the most, and also knowing that there's so much potential for them to be. Schools has such a power to create a sense of agency for kids, and I felt that my son gets a lot of that where he was, and my daughter hasn't had as much of a chance. And so the setting where kids are is really critical, and kids have so much potential. That's always the way I feel that we can create so many things for them.
Either what were those challenges, or what did you learn from those challenges in making sure, especially your daughter, had what she needed to learn to the max, so to speak? Was there?
I think the overall thing for me is like teaching is very complex, and that we need to really meet the kids where they are. And so we make a lot of assumptions often on kids, and our kid might be upset, and it's like we climb the ladder of inference, and this child is upset because of X, Y, and Z. But ask the kid, hear the kid's voices. How often do we actually incorporate that in the learning process? So I think overall, I have tremendous respect for the teaching, the teachers in our district. As a teacher, I felt that I was somewhat of a good teacher, but it's really difficult to have a class of 15 or 20 kids and meet every child where they are and bring them to the next level.
Yeah.
Like hitting the zone of proximal development for every child is not an easy task. I always say it's
so
rocket
how did
science.
you do that? How did you try to do that even?
So what we do is professional development. To me, is like having teachers come together to talk about how do we move a child from point A to point B.
That's very interesting because I think the outside perspective is often that the professional development facilitates the teacher's knowledge and doesn't necessarily, I have to phrase this carefully, that it's more focused on the development of the teacher than it is the connection with the student. So that's very interesting you said that.
Well, it depends on the professional development.
It depends on a lot of things.
We're talking about cultural responsive teaching.
Yeah.
It's all about how do we understand kids? How do we understand ourselves? I think 80% of this work is like, how do we know ourselves so we can actually be present for the kids? I kind of agree on the sense that there's a lot of attention to the literacy and to the math. And part of that is also because as educators, we're not mathematicians. We're not, we're generalists. And so it is important to build up the areas in which we need to reinforce. But we do a lot of emphasis around social emotional. We do cultural, we do the restorative justice work that we're doing in every building. That is really about...
How long has that existed? It hasn't been around that long, has it?
Cultural responsive teaching?
I mean, specifically in Somerville, that office.
Recently, yeah, correct. We are actually in a rollout phase of that work. And so it's just relatively new,
So let's mush it all together. And talk about your role as a superintendent. How easy or not has the transition been from what you've done before to this role?
So, as a principal, I was a principal for quite some time, so I kind of live and breathe the space, and I already have a blueprint of what the work looks like and sounds like. Then when I went into central office, it was the same thing. It was easy for me to kind of
And you did that in more than one place, right?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
And so I think in my last assignment in Salem, I worked really close with the superintendent, and he was a great role model. And I felt like the work that he was doing was work that really was very compatible to the work that I wanted to do.
So he was a good model or mentor or something.
Yes, I mean, the superintendent in Lowell was amazing too. And I had a couple of superintendents in Salem as well, and I was able to work directly with them. So and then my program, my doctorate was around educational leadership in Boston College. And so to me, it was an extension of all the work that I was doing. So
so you were ready,
I felt
you were ready as you could be.
Correct, exactly. the thing that I could have jumped into the fray, if you will, earlier, but I was looking for a district that was the right fit. And I was very fortunate that Somerville came at that point, and so it really kind of aligned with my core values, and so.
So you've taught in Lowell and Salem. You've been an administrator in Salem and Boston. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
So okay, and you just almost did this, so I will tease you about it, which is that Salem Public Schools is SPS and Somerville Public Schools is SPS. Does that ever confuse things for you? You can ignore this question if you want.
Once in a while, I say SPS.
I would think that would confuse me. So, and okay, so be more serious. Have you? What's been hardest about the transition, or the biggest challenge of the job so far?
I think the political side of the work is complex. I think that being able to respond to all the stakeholders in a way that we continue to focus on the vision of the district has been a challenge. A new muscle that I'm exercising is also the relationship with the city and the school committee. I think no training allows you to get as close as the real thing. And so those are things that I didn't have in my prior assignments that are new to me. The rest of them, I think, is just the scale, is the size of, having to pay attention to many things that I know that the minute that I lose attention to something, I feel that I am going to have some trouble.
A lot of balls in the air.
Correct.
Yes.
And yet, I have an amazing team.
Have people been nice to you? Have you received the support? No, seriously, have you received the support that you would have hoped to receive?
Absolutely. I really, again, I'm very fortunate. Somerville is an amazing district.
Is there any one person or policy that has been especially useful to you in taking on the job?
Policy that has been useful.
It doesn't have to be, just anything that's made it easier, like even the parking is not, whatever it is. Was there anything that has been especially useful?
Yeah. I think what is useful is being able to have a school committee that either guides or engages in a reflective discussion around things around policy that I have the benefit of thinking and reflecting and coming back to my team and saying, what does this mean for larger decisions? So I think that process, the process itself, has been very helpful.
Okay.
I cannot think of any I think the values of our district makes it easy.
I see.
In part because it kind of aligns to my values, so I don't have to, fake or justify any of it.
You speak the same
Correct.
language. Yeah.
Yes. So that's probably the easiest thing that I find has been a peace of mind.
That's interesting because you say the political side is the most difficult, but that I would think is sort of a component of dealing with the stakeholders. So that bodes well, perhaps, for your superintendentship, I guess.
I don't know, time will tell.
Yeah. Most of your predecessors were superintendent for 8 or 9 years. You probably knew that, right? Yeah. So.
And that's good, by the way.
Yeah, it's much
really
longer than average, isn't it?
The average right now is 3 years.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah.
So it's a healthy tenure.
So speaking of multiple stakeholders, in the upcoming new Trump administration, there might be concerns about how undocumented or immigrant residents are treated in general. Have people come to you or anyone in the district, any teachers, and said, we're scared, or we need a different type of support, or we need what we got like in 2016, 2017? Is that on the radar, or is it not?
Yeah, I think, so we have probably the role model community team in our state. Is the SFLC is really, I don't think I've ever seen a community engagement team that is so articulate, so well organized.
What is that? Somerville Family Learning?
collaborative.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
SFLC.
I almost was there.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so they have really such a strong connection with the community, and especially our immigrant families and undocumented families. And so that welcoming spirit is reflected everywhere, especially in the work that they do with these families.
So how is that different or not from parent liaisons, or the parent liaison? Is that a separate program, or is that?
Well, SFLC works at the central office and
Okay.
in connection with the city. There's Somerville, and so they basically, there's a lot of
That was going to be my next.
correct.
Yeah.
And the family liaisons are at the building level, at the school levels, but
So are they in the same? How do those communicate, or are they?
They meet on a regular basis. They are
Okay.
led by the same folks who lead the SFLC. So
Okay.
there is a tight connection in terms of how they do the work. It's an implementation of the initiatives and vision that SFLC has as a department. And they also work with the principals, obviously, and their communities, but the parent liaisons are really tightly aligned and coordinated through SFLC.
So my son, one of my son's best friends, with whom he is now rooming, his mother is a parent liaison,
Yeah.
and for a while the son was also working at the high school, so they would commute
That's
together. And she's from Colombia.
Oh.
So anyway, so is there anything that the city isn't doing or isn't anticipating? And you've talked about the connection with the schools. Is there anything more that can be done to help in this area, or is there obviously some limitations given the situation?
Are we talking in particular to our immigrant and undocumented family? So I know that, again, the work that has been very consistent about making sure that we meet families where they are. The work that happens at SFLC is also informed by the city work. So the lens that we have around the support is not just from the school side, but also from the city side.
Yeah.
So I feel, again, that is a very comprehensive network of support that many other cities don't engage in. And so
the connection
that
between
connection,
the two.
correct. And so there are different partnerships or braided funded activities that we have done with the city to support families.
So last month in December, Somerville, the immigration office, they had a few workshops, right, on what
correct.
immigrant rights are.
Yeah.
Was that something that was advertised to the schools, or was there a connection between? Was there coordination?
Correct. So correct. There's coordination with SFLC, and I think, again, anything that is intended to support our families is something that is shared through SFLC as well. And so families have been given information around that.
On that note,
Yeah.
which is a hopeful one, I hope, we have to stop.
Yeah.
This has been School Committee Update. Have a good day.